Good morning, my beautiful babes and babettes. I'm your resident active advocate, and today I would like to talk to you about the first movie outside of the Disney Renaissance, or at least the movie that is considered to have concluded the Disney Renaissance, that being Tarzan. Tarzan and disability, though, specifically, because when looking at the movie as opposed to the book, there's much more of a disability-oriented narrative in the movie than there is in the book. In the book, it's much more of a racial narrative. I don't really want to get into that because there are some horrific implications in the book. Read it for yourself if you have a strong enough stomach, because there's some very, very bad things that go on in that book. And especially in terms of modern context, because holy F racism. In the movie, though, to get back to my own roots here, I would like to discuss the sort of interspecies concept of ableism, and I promise this will make sense when I get into it. So, for narrative context, Tarzan and his two human parents are stranded in the jungles of Africa when their ship kind of, there's a shipwreck, sorry. And baby Tarzan and his parents escape, and the father and mother build a tree house. They are clearly there to observe rather than to interfere. They're on an expedition, as would be said in Winnie the Pooh, which is the most adorable story ever. And they live there for a number of months at least. Tarzan is still a baby when they are killed by the leopard Sabor, all right? When Tarzan's parents are killed, he is discovered by the gorilla Kala, who has just lost her own infant child to the same leopard Sabor. And she adopts Tarzan into the family of gorillas. He is not accepted at all by especially his adopted father, Kerchak, but also by the surrounding community of gorillas. You get the gorilla Turk, who is played by Rosie O'Donnell, and I actually really like this character, but she consistently calls him the Hairless Wonder. All right. You get a time skip in which Tarzan grows up a bit. He's probably like 6, 7 years old when the narrative really kicks in. But you see him with Turk and her gang of gorillas, and also with Tantor the elephant, who is friends with the, I don't know what a group of gorillas is called. The group of gorillas, okay? I can't remember the name for these things, but Tarzan is treated as inferior and different by the gorillas. They do not know what he is. He does not know what he is. They have no context surrounding him because his parents were already dead by this point. There was no observation done by the gorillas of the humans. There was also no observation from the humans done of the gorillas. It's not implied in any way that those two groups ever found each other before. So having no context whatsoever of the fact that Tarzan is of a different species than they are, they believe him to be an inferior gorilla. Now, species differences aside here, if Tarzan really were a gorilla, he would definitely be inferior in the context of this narrative because, well, he is of superior intelligence, being human, and I'll get to that. He is of vastly inferior physical ability. He cannot swing from the vines, he cannot climb as quickly, he's not as strong, he can't wrestle, he can't, horse around to such an extent as the other gorilla children can because they're just so much physically stronger than he is, being a weaker human child. Don't ask how this even makes sense in the physical. We have to dispense with our understanding of reality here. How could a human be raised by gorillas? But with that aside, the idea is that he is physically different and physically inferior, even though he's smarter. So he's taken aside by his mother, Kala, right? And, she shows him the similarities rather than the differences. His hand is shaped like her hand. They both have 5 fingers. They both have opposable thumbs because they're different species, but they're on a related evolutionary line. The book, by the way, was written when the Darwinian theory of evolution was basically just up and coming, and people didn't really understand it yet, and they were still looking for what was at that time called the missing link. This concept still exists, but we have discovered through continual research that it's not so much an idea of a missing link as it is missing steps along this extraordinarily slow, drawn out progression. It's not, you see those graphs of how evolution occurred. You start with monkey and get up to, Homo sapien. But those graphs are extraordinarily misleading because they leave out nigh infinite, quote, steps in between. There's no such thing as an evolutionary step. You don't go from one day being one species to the next day being another species. But because Tarzan's species is related to that of the gorillas, Kala is able to show him how he can fit in with them. They have the same shape of hand, they have the same shape of foot, they do actually have similar brains, even though they don't function in the same way. And, Tarzan is able to speak the language of gorillas. He's taught the laws of the jungle by the gorillas who are actually willing to get on with him. And he's taught who his enemies are. He's taught who his friends are. He is capable of integrating into this, shall we say, society because he's just similar enough. There's a part of the movie that I want to call the training montage. You get the Phil Collins song, which I really like, called Son of Man, playing throughout this montage, and you see Tarzan going from boyhood to manhood and how his skill sets evolve as he goes on. He becomes a much better hunter, he becomes a much faster climber, he's able to swing on the vines, he invents his own form of tree surfing, which is so cool, and I love the animation in this movie. For one thing, it's gorgeous. For another, it's completely unrealistic, and that's amazing because it's a cartoon. But the whole idea is that in becoming physically more active, physically stronger, Tarzan is able to fit in and even exceed the members of his community, to excel, rather, the members of his community. There's a scene in the training montage where you see gorillas picking ants out of an anthill, and Tarzan basically, makes a lot of noise by putting this sort of trumpeted form log. He kind of streams down this log and it scares all the bugs out, and then the gorillas are able to feast. The average gorilla wouldn't have the intelligence level to do that, but a human does. So you see that as Tarzan's physical development becomes at least more on par with theirs, his intelligence, though, has always exceeded theirs. So, in a manner of speaking, he is superior to this community by the time he is an adult, fully grown male, right? The problem is introduced when freaking pop-ups pop up. The problem in this story is introduced when the other humans come in. You get Jane and her father, Archimedes. Archimedes Q. Porter at your service, and I love their relationship. They are there for research purposes rather than, seek and destroy or seek and capture for the purpose of money, which their bodyguard is there to do, to be fair. But Tarzan is the one who ends up saving his community from the hunter, from the poacher who accompanied this research duo. But at the same time, he doesn't want to leave his family, but he finds that he is biologically, of course, identical, or at least much more similar to the humans who have now come into his home. And he sees the only female human he has ever seen. And of course, because it's Disney, it's insta love. That happens in the book too, by the way, but for different reasons. All right. In the movie, he ends up saving her life. In the book, he pretty much just admires her from a distance. There are other humans in the book, um, but he does not feel drawn to them whatsoever. He feels very much drawn to Jane as opposed to the females of the tribe who live in the jungle. Read the book for yourself. As I say, I'm not getting into this. It makes me squeamish. I read the book once. That's enough. I believe that Tarzan's whole attraction to Jane in this movie is based not only on the fact that they are physically similar, but on the fact, too, that she takes interest in his family, in his world. She wants to know about him as much as he wants to know about her. And they exchange their experiences, and she teaches him how to speak, which to me is kind of interesting because in the very first instance of when he begins to speak, he imitates her accent, but after that, he adopts an American accent, which is interesting because he has never heard human speech before. So it would at first just be sheer imitation. He would be intelligent enough to do this, theoretically, but it may be difficult. May be much more difficult than the movie would have us believe, but it's a kid's movie. That said, he would definitely, if this were realistic, he would continue to imitate her accent because he's never heard any other kind of speech. He wouldn't talk like an American. He would talk like a Brit, right? So you get this. But he takes her and her father to see the gorillas and inadvertently leads the poacher, Clayton, to them. In the end, his surrogate father, Kerchak, takes a bullet and finally admits that, yes, Tarzan is worthy of belonging with their tribe, of belonging with their species. He has always been among the best of them, and Kerchak finally admits to this, which really is all Tarzan had ever wanted out of Kerchak. All he had wanted was validation from those whom he sought to be like. In the real world, this can be analogous to a disability narrative in that Tarzan is physically, as I say, inferior to the gorillas. He is also seen as a kind of outcast cultural inferior because he doesn't look like them. In the sense of the disability narrative present in this movie, Tarzan is constantly having to do bigger, better, greater things than any of his gorilla companions or counterparts because he doesn't fit in. This is a very good example of the model of the quote super crip. Sorry, I said quote again, but he ends up killing the leopard Sabor, who had been savaging the tribe, who had killed his parents. So inadvertently, he avenged his parents and also Kala's child. But it was only through this act that his tribe began to see him as an equal. It was only through this thing that none of them could do that they saw him as an equal. Not a superior, but an equal. So the whole idea of the supercrip narrative is if you, as the person with the difference or the disability, want to be on our level, you have to do something bigger, better than any of us would have to do in order to prove ourselves to our community. That is exactly what happens to Tarzan. Even taking the human narrative out of this, if you were to take them out of the picture entirely, this would have to be the way it would be for Tarzan to prove his worth to his tribe. When the humans, however, come into the picture, you see that he has the potential to be equally intelligent to them because those are the people he actually belongs to. That's the tribe he actually belongs to. At the same time, though, the Darwinian idea of the missing link is still present here, because Tarzan has the physicality, the physical skills now of a member of his own family, but has the intelligence of a human. So he's riding the line between both. And that is very often the role that people with disabilities play as well, because it is, you can come in, but you'll never be fully in. You'll always have one foot in, one foot out. And regardless of how you identify yourself, that doesn't matter. Your identification is based on what we want you to be. And that applies to minorities of all sorts of different kinds. It's not just people with disabilities. It can be people of different races, people who are mixed race, you know, like someone with one white parent and one black parent. They're not considered half white, half black. They're considered whatever, other people want them to be. One is not free to determine their own identity outside of the structure that has been created around them and for them to fit into. And that is also the case with Tarzan. Even when he meets the humans, he still wants to fit in with the gorillas, but he realizes that these biologically are much more my people than these are. But because I grew up with this set, because this set raised me, this is the set that I want to belong to. The question is, can I? And the movie ends with him being fully integrated with the gorillas. He's their savior twice over, both from the leopard and from Clayton the poacher. And he has proved himself through two great acts of heroism, neither of which any other gorilla was capable of doing. And that was the way he had to get in on the action, because comparatively speaking, he is disabled next to them. Physically, he's different. Biologically, he's different. And that, in the real world, oftentimes makes all the difference, which I think is a BS narrative. We need to rewrite this narrative and say, I'm going to fit it in on my own terms, and if you don't like it, too bad, because this is me, c'est moi, And that is my analysis of Tarzan. I feel like I may be reaching for some of this, but it's true, too, that there is definitely a physical difference here going on. Even in the original book, there were ideas of that nature, but it had a different sort of conceit than the movie has, and especially in his relationship with Kerchak. So read the book at your discretion, but be warned, it's not very pretty. All right, I just want to give a bit of a content warning in regard to the book. It's a good read, but it's not a nice read, if you understand what I mean. All right, so that is my video for today. I have no idea what we're doing tomorrow. I will find out and get back to you on that tomorrow. Have a lovely, wonderful, sunny outside day, woohoo, and I'll see y'all later. Mwah.